There are characters in superhero comics who are just born to suffer. Bruce Banner, Bruce Wayne, someone who isn't named Bruce. But to me, the one who suffers the most in the Big Two's output is Roy Harper, also known as Speedy, Arsenal, and of course, Red Arrow. I, like many fans, got into Roy through his adaptations in Batman the Brave and the Bold, Teen Titans, and of course, Young Justice, where he not only became a pivotal character in Season 1's plot as a secret clone of the original Roy, but also got to settle down, raise a daughter, and run a security business with his fellow Roy clones as Bowhunter Security.
Always on point.
But in the comics, it's a much different story. Adopted from a reservation for insert random Native American tribe name here after his parents died in a wildfire, Roy was a moody teenager who came to live with billionaire neoliberal Oliver Queen after proving his archery skills firsthand. However, given Oliver's poor investment decisions and general assholery, the two's relationship would fray as Roy decided to join his fellow sidekicks in the field as part of the original Teen Titans. Acting as a lady-killing street kid with a chip or two on his shoulder, Roy was the bad boy if a team meant to help teens in need needed one. This is where he'd get his first girlfriend in the form of Wonder Girl, who was new to man's world and to love. And for a long time, that's all Roy's character really amounted to. The bad boy with a second-rate mentor that only stuck around due to brand recognition. But around the same time Roy was palling around with Dick, Wally, and Garth, changes were being made in the greater comic book landscape. First, writer Denny O'Neal was inspired by a redesign done by artist Neal Adams to take away most of Oliver's fortune, making Oliver a hero for the working class, but still a huge asshole. Then, to help supplement the failing Green Lantern title at the time, paired the two Emerald Avengers together, hoping to not only boost sales, but also start commenting on issues of their current day. This was around the dawn of the 70s, when censorship for comic books due to the Comics Code Authority was starting to wane a bit. So after Marvel tackled the concept of addiction in Amazing Spider-Man through the character of Harry Osborn, O'Neal and Adams were pushed to tell a socially relevant story surrounding the growing heroin epidemic. And for maximum emotional impact, O'Neal decided the best way to tackle addiction is by having it surround someone you'd never expect: Roy. Explained as Roy living on the streets as Oliver traveled the country with Hal Jordan, his neglect from his mentor and the perfectionist nature of his superhero pals drove Roy into a dark place. When Oliver returned and figured out that he was dependent on a street dealer, he kicked Roy out, ashamed that his ward would be a junkie. Hal was much kinder to Roy, bringing him to Oliver's new girlfriend Black Canary's place to deal with his withdrawal as they stopped the street dealer for good. And as Roy crumples into Dinah's arms, saying how worthless he truly feels, one of the kids he would get high with dies from an overdose. At his friend's funeral, Roy has gone clean, and Oliver offers him a place by his side once again. And though the original plans for the ending of this story had him doing so, returning things to a simple status quo, the decision was made to not keep Roy as Ollie's ward, saying he's better off on his own, hammering home the consequences of his own decisions. While O'Neal somewhat regretted the way he left Roy's story, DC Comics ran with this characterization, feeding back into his relationship with the Titans after their first breakup, as he comes off colder and more prone to fighting. This would be made worse with a rejection from Donna on taking things to the next level, given Wonder Girl was told a prophecy that if she married a redhead, they would die tragically. So after yet another Titans breakup, Roy decides to become an advocate for drug safety. Working as the drummer for a rock band called Great Frog, Roy would mentor youths about the dangers of drug usage and how easily a kid can become addicted to illicit substances. Oliver even runs into him during the band's tour, stopping his increasingly corrupt manager while honoring his former ward's independence, hoping he'd gone clean. Which sadly, he didn't. In truth, Roy had relapsed due to his bandmate Corey, another heroin addict, who would sadly overdose during one of their regular sessions. With the death of another friend because of the drugs he swore off and the band he helped found being torn away from him, Roy decided that simply speaking on drug usage wasn't enough. So, he joined the DEA, working his way from organization to organization as part of several anti-drug task forces, even involving the new Teen Titans, which he guest starred in for an anti-drug PSA to take down several compounds across New York City and deep into South America. Once again acting as a youth counselor when in his Speedy costume, Marv Wolfman not only canonized Roy's addiction as a core part of his backstory, but also left the door open for more to be done with his redemption, how the boy who slipped through the cracks became the one who picked people back up. Told them life was worth living, even with a disease as bad as addiction. Now this was a great change for Roy, but this is superhero comics. Given the nature of the Big Two and maintaining interest, something needed to happen to Roy to keep him relevant. Given he was already positioned as an addiction spokesperson, having him relapse again seemed almost cruel despite the realism behind it. Some people just quit drugs and stay off them after all. So, writer Marv Wolfman and artist George Perez took Roy in an interesting direction, one that built off his status as a government agent and their ongoing plans for both the Teen Titans and the state of the DCU. Around this time, Dick had officially made the transition from Robin to Nightwing, with Jason Todd officially taking on the prior role under Batman. Wally had changed roles from Kid Flash to just The Flash after Barry Allen died during Crisis on Infinite Earths, and Roy went from a womanizing secret agent into a single father. After meeting the ruthless assassin and drug runner Cheshire on one of his undercover missions, Roy spread his Speedy seed and just as quickly left before his lover could figure out he was a superhero. When she did, Cheshire, or just Jade as I'll call her, was pissed enough to keep their daughter a secret, something she couldn't keep from Roy forever, especially when he's called back to the Titans by Donna to stop her and her goons from messing with a meeting with Soviet ambassadors. After the Wonder Girl-led Titans fail on an international scale, Roy sought out Jade and was finally introduced to his infant daughter, Leanne. Seeing in her a second chance for himself, Roy decides to give co-parenting with a woman he only knew for a week a shot. And it goes poorly. I don't know what you expected. Resorting to lying to Dick in order to take his daughter back, Roy would begin a pattern revolving around his newfound daughter. He would have her and raise her, she would get kidnapped by Jade or someone who hates Jade because she nuked a third world country once.
You what?
He enlists Dick or one-time Batman in order to get her back, and he then reconciles that he never truly loved Jade to begin with, even though he still clearly has a thing for her. All the while, his ex-girlfriend Donna Troy gets married to Marv Wolfman's self-insert character Terry Long and has her own redheaded child in the form of Robert. They die horribly. This is foreshadowing. As Roy juggled being a single dad with commitment issues in the 80s and 90s, he would still be a regular player in the Titans and its several spin-offs, even leading the team at one point due to his latest employers at Checkmate not trusting the Titans to operate without a government supervisor, changing his name to Arsenal. This natural evolution of an underdog into the top dog of a team he was only really a guest star in further cemented how far Roy had come since the days he was using heroin, and how far he still had to go when the team disbanded. Something that didn't happen because of him per se, and more an issue surrounding the Arrow line of comics and a general issue with ongoing Big Two stories. Poor sales. No matter how good a story is, if it ain't selling, it ain't lasting. And lucky for Roy, he always manages to bounce back, working best as a side character in ensemble works like Dan Jurgens' Teen Titans, a book where he joined halfway through, got a new costume, and became a mentor figure for this new generation of teenagers, hoping none of them end up like he did. Then, when that team's run ended, Dick starts up a whole new team of Titans with Roy at the forefront. During this time, he would start dating Donna again, who reveals later on that she only really started dating him because she wanted to feel less perfect.
That's rough, buddy.
While this stings, Roy decides to be the bigger person and let bygones be bygones. After all, he has a pretty sweet gig. He works with his friends for a living, helps troubled super teens, occasionally does work for the government, and his daughter Leanne is still there, not kidnapped or worse. Things seem pretty alright for Roy. Then Donna dies. Because of a robot. Not that robot, which was sent from the future to kill her. This robot, which looks like Superman. So, in the wake of this temporary superhero tragedy, because death is always temporary, Roy starts his own superhero team, a revamp of the Outsiders led by him and Dick. A team Dick says he doesn't want to get attached to, given how messy all their prior teams and breakups ended up being. But given this is a found family type of team, it's bound to happen anyway. This includes the robot he reprogrammed in the midst of battle who was given a second chance at life as Indigo. Getting into a cute but short-lived romance with Metamorpho, who isn't really Metamorpho but just a small chunk of him that gained independence. Either way, she dies. So, there goes that redemption. That, on top of getting shot several times, Leanne getting kidnapped by a sex trafficking organization, a fight with Dick that ends with him being called an addict again, and Donna's inevitable resurrection, Roy reconsiders being a leader of what he planned to be a covert ops super team. He steps back to take a more hands-on approach to raising Leanne, not just relying on a sitter, but moving to Star City with a now 6-year-old girl to have a proper suburban life. But he's a superhero. So when Hal and Dinah reach out to him instead of Oliver about a mission involving Dr. T.O. Morrow and the robot Amazo, how could he say no? Oliver even gives him his blessing as the combined efforts of Roy's squad, the Trinity, Black Lightning, and the voluptuous Vixen result in a new Justice League forming, one with Roy at the forefront as Red Arrow. To me, this is peak character development for any superhero. Joining the League not just because you're skilled, but because despite everything you've been through, the disease you carry, they trust you? It makes me miss this era of the DCU. The idea that sidekicks can truly become the next generation of heroes, not just taking up their mentor's identity, but carving their own as a worthy wielder of the mask. But say it with me now, this is superhero comics. And according to Marvel's Senior Vice President Tom Brevoort, outrage sells, not stability. While I love Roy and wish his story just ended here, editorial's plans for the direction of the Justice League changed things drastically. This included chopping Roy's arm off in the infamous story Cry for Justice, a story that saw Oliver Queen quitting the League due to a difference of ideals, hunting down the villain Prometheus as he sends his goon the Electrocutioner to destroy Oliver's home of Star City. This results in probably one of the worst decisions DC has ever made, one they have made up for in the present, but is also the reason why I'm making this video. They killed Leanne. Oh hell no! This sends Roy over the edge, hallucinating his dead friend Corey and a rotting Leanne as he relapses, using his newly made mechanical arm to kill the Electrocutioner, but not before proving once and for all that he's the better fighter to Oliver. This story was written by J.T. Krul, who was also writing Titans at the time. His plan was to have this fall from grace redeemed by Roy denying a chance from Deathstroke of all people to revive his daughter, betraying him in a desperate Cheshire as he starts a new team of Titans alongside Titan-turned-villain Jericho. While this, to me, is again good character development in the long term, in the short term, people hated it. They hated edgy Roy, they hated his relapse, they hated the idea that he can't be happy. So instead of building toward that happy future where he's at peace with his horrible decision-making, DC decided to reboot. In the New 52, Roy is now the tech expert for Oliver Queen's operation, the one who invented the trick arrows and was thrown out for abusing Oliver's trust, not to mention the heroin usage. While Oliver kept the tech, Roy would team up with the Jason Todd of this reboot to form Red Hood and the Outlaws, acting as his tech guy while he deals with his addiction issues and failing memory. And while this era of Roy gives him a starring role, getting to fuck Starfire and even changing the book's name to Red Hood and Arsenal for several issues, this wasn't the Roy that people wanted to see. They wanted to see the Titan who overcame it all, the man who fought against people's perceived notions about him and became a pillar for the superhero community. So DC brought back the Titans in this continuity, saying every member was forced to forget the time they were ever Titans because of a mixture of Mr. Twister, the team's first ever villain, and Dr. Manhattan, who, I still don't get why he's here. This is where things start to feel more familiar. Roy flirts with Donna, acts as the team's voice of reason amidst Dick's deceptions, he relapses against his will after meeting Jade again, and this time he's sent to a rehab facility, one meant for superheroes called Sanctuary. I'm not happy that he relapsed, but hey, it happens. You can't fault a person for something like that, especially if you know they're working on it. It's just that DC didn't want to tell a story about addiction with Roy this time around. Oh no! They wanted to kill him. And they did during Heroes in Crisis, a divisive event comic whose events have ultimately been undone with the revival and redemption of everyone involved. This included Wally West, who was initially depicted as a mass murderer driven to insanity due to a poor representation of exposure therapy. While Roy would come back at first as a zombie during Dark Knight's death metal before officially returning to life as a temporary Black Lantern in the present, something happened between these two storylines. Everyone, and I mean everyone, as a result of the newly formed multiverse, have remembered the events of post-Crisis. The memories of those events showed back into their heads alongside their current New 52 memories. This included Leanne, who through multiversal mumbo-jumbo was returned to life as a teenage thief named Cheshire Cat. She's reunited with Roy, the eternally separated father and daughter, together again. Part of a big family where she can honor both her father and her mother despite their poor job at raising her. To some, this is a great decision. Roy gets to be happy again, and every bad thing that happened to him is still canon. He can be at peace despite all the bullshit he's been through. He can be a father again. But to me, this is almost a tragedy waiting to happen. Given the nature of change in DC Comics and the need for sales when things get too stable, Roy's happy ending isn't an ending, just a stopgap. His status as a single dad of a high schooler can be ripped away from him at any time, because what else are they going to do with the character? By design, he is driven by suffering, by going through horrible shit and coming out on top again. And if he's on top right now, it's only a matter of time before his luck runs out, before editorial changes again, forcing him to relapse or go rogue or die again because there isn't anything else they can think of. These characters can't simply retire or walk off into the sunset. They need to keep growing and changing because the industry keeps growing and changing. You keep growing and changing. So while Roy is happy again now, his suffering is not a question of if, But when? When will the other shoe drop? When will the silver needle strike again? When will Roy lose his arm again? I want to leave this video on a positive note, so here's my pitch for Roy so fans can have him be happy without dumbing him down or pairing him with Jason. Family sitcom. Roy's the dad who has wild stories from his past but is very protective of his teenage daughter in the present. A daughter who keeps him on his toes with the occasional Titans member, her own mother, entering the picture. Just like Wally and Jeremy Adams' Flash Run, people want to see these characters grow up, want to see them develop their own families and personal dynamics. Why not let Roy have that again and just stick with it? The tragedy of Red Arrow was that he wasn't even Red Arrow that long, and that because of the reboot, he won't be again for a long, long time. Especially since Oliver's sister took the mantle, what the fuck? Thank you for watching.